All right, hello everybody. I've got a short one for you today. I was looking through my YouTube feed and a video popped up that was titled H.P. Lovecraft's Favorite Horror Story. I was vaguely interested. It's made by a channel called Liminal Spaces, and it's about a story that is by Algernon Blackwood called The Willows. Liminal Spaces, in his early analysis, refers to Lovecraft's essay Supernatural Horror in Literature, which is something I actually intended to go through at some point, but I haven't gotten to it yet. But he does dredge this out from that essay, and we can pull two quotes about The Willows and Algernon Blackwood from this essay that I think are relevant. First quote, and remember, this is Lovecraft writing. Of the quality of Mr. Blackwood's genius there can be no dispute, for no one has even approached the skill, seriousness, and minute fidelity with which he records the overtones of strangeness in ordinary things and experiences, or the preternatural insight with which he builds up detail by detail the complete sensations and perceptions leading from reality into supernormal life or vision. So clearly Lovecraft is a big Algernon Blackwood fan, but here he goes on a moment later to talk about the actual story, The Willows. Quote, foremost of all must be reckoned the Willows, in which the nameless presences on a desolate Danube island are horribly felt and recognized by a pair of idle voyagers. Here, art and restraint in narrative reach their very highest development, and an impression of lasting poignancy is produced without a single strained passage or a single false note. This is high praise from Lovecraft. And having now read The Willows, I can see that Lovecraft's prose was probably pretty seriously influenced by Blackwood's prose, assuming that Blackwood wrote similarly to this in his other stories. I decided to sit down and read the story. It was originally published, to the best I can tell, in 1907 in a book called The Listener and Other Stories. And I'm going to try to avoid spoilers here myself. Liminal Spaces does a pretty in-depth plot synopsis. So if you want, a 20-minute, 15-minute plot description of the action of the story, you can head over there and check out his channel and his video. And it's a good video, so, it's worth taking a look at, even if you skip the plot synopsis part if you're planning to read the story. Instead, what I'll do is I'll focus more on the quality of the writing, and I just have a few things to say. Number one, Blackwood's style in this story is kind of the long paragraph, elevated kind of prose that you see in Lovecraft a lot. Although Lovecraft uses a lot more, big words. Blackwood's style in this story is very, like I said, elevated. He sounds intelligent, you know what I mean? But at the same time, he's not using gigantic words for fun stuffs. And his prose has that kind of lyrical or poetic feel to it with the way that it flows and is paced in the way that a lot of Lovecraft's really good stuff sounded as well. So if you like the way that Lovecraft's fiction flows, you'll like how The Willows flows as well. Now, this story, as was mentioned in the quote, is two idle voyagers are heading down the Danube, and they're in this big swampy area, and they land on an island, and a bunch of scary stuff happens. And I'm oversimplifying it deliberately because, again, I don't want to do a plot synopsis. It's very good to actually sit down and read this story because of the expert way in which the tension rises gradually over the course of the whole story. So, what we see in this story, and what is very well represented by the writing, is a careful, slow, but steady advance of strangeness and tension onto these two characters, all alone, miles and miles from human habitation. Over time, this indefinite horror kind of creeps into their minds, and they both come to different conclusions about what it is and what it means. Their own unsureness kind of leads to a form of not quite madness, but one level lower than that, of both of them, where one of them is trying to justify things, and the other one is kind of going off on his own kind of, what would you call it? Like his own flight of fancy on how to interpret what's going on. And these these differences continue to rise along with the tension as the tension reaches a peak. What we end up with is kind of a conflict between naturalistic interpretation of these events and a supernatural interpretation. And it's not quite true that one character represents nature and the other character represents the supernatural. There is a bit of mixing, and so it's more complicated than that, which makes it better and more interesting to read. There is kind of an occasional slight slackening of tension, right? The rising sun dispels the monsters, sort of. It's not that simple. But generally speaking, what happens is whenever the tension slackens a little bit, it rises a moment later to a new height. And so you kind of get that, you breathe out and then you breathe in again. It's kind of like that. The ending, which is really well done, concludes with a climactic struggle, an unlikely coincidence, and a very horrifying confirmation, which, again, I'll say no more about it. Blackwood's prose contains very beautiful descriptions of nature. Not just nature, but also like pastoral human living as well. There are frequent, short, but illuminating examinations of the main character's state of mind. So you don't get some kind of like really long Death Note internal monologue, but you do get little glimpses into what the main character is thinking. And it happens frequently enough that you stay, or you're drawn into kind of a sympathetic position with the main character. We end up with a friendship that has gone on for a long time. These people have known each other for years and years and years. They've been traveling together many, many times. And that friendship begins to be questioned by suspicions of madness that probably both of them are having of each other. And then I would say that the prose also does a very good job of like conveying a feeling of not just isolation, but also like an isolation that with it comes some form of despair, in the sense that not only are you isolated, but you're also helpless. So, and not just helpless too. Like you might betray yourself in a sense. It's very carefully and well done in that way. All right, cutting in here for a quick edit, I realized that I had intended to read a couple of little passages from the story in order to actually illustrate the prose. So we'll do that right now. First, this is from the first page, very early on. Shouldn't spoil anything, but just an example of kind of Blackwood's lyrical feeling and description of nature. Here we go. In high flood, this great acreage of sand, shingle beds, and willow-grown islands is almost topped by the water. But in normal seasons, the bushes bend and rustle in the free winds, showing their silver leaves to the sunshine in an ever-moving plain of bewildering beauty. These willows never attain to the dignity of trees. They have no rigid trunks. They remain humble bushes with rounded tops and soft outline, swaying on slender stems that answer to the least pressure of the wind, supple as grasses, and so continually shifting that they somehow give the impression that the entire plain is moving and alive. For the wind sends waves rising and falling over the whole surface, waves of leaves instead of waves of water. Green swells like the sea, too, until the branches turn and lift, and then silvery white as their underside turns to the sun. So, describing nature very well. And then here, just a part where the main character is talking about the solitude of his camping place. The solitude of that Danube camping place, can I ever forget it? The feeling of being utterly alone on an empty planet. My thoughts ran incessantly upon cities and the haunts of men. I would have given my soul, as the saying is, for the feel of those Bavarian villages we had passed through by the score, for the normal, human commonplaces, peasants drinking beer, tables beneath the trees, hot sunshine, and a ruined castle on the rocks behind the red-roofed church. Even the tourists would have been welcome. So yeah, just a couple little examples of the prose in this story, and now we'll back to it. In short, the four-word example of this would be the writing. The writing is extremely solid, but it also requires your attention. I found that the lyrical tone of the story and the amount of kind of descriptiveness of nature leads to a sense of like repetition while you're not actually repeating things. It's like hearing a song, but a little bit of the song is changed every time it repeats, right? I found that even the sound of a fan was making me miss stuff and go back and be like, wait, did I read this already? Like, I had to turn everything off and just sit down in pure quiet and focus on the story, because it kept kind of like lulling me into this sense of like I can just kind of flow along with the story, which, again, very interesting way to feel in a story where cosmic horror is kind of rising against you. I would recommend that if you like horror, if you like Lovecraft, if you like supernatural wilderness stories, if you like weird horror especially, that you should take a little quiet time out and go read this story. Then you can go check out Liminal Spaces video as well, because he talks a lot about like where it was reprinted and stuff like that, which is some interesting background as well as some other stories that kind of have similar things. For me, the thing that I've read most recently that this reminded me of the most was The Thing from Outside by George Allen England. I did a review of that a little while ago. And so, yeah, it's a very good story. It's the PDF version that I'm going to link to is only 23 pages long, but it's also very dense, kind of like the Amazing Stories like setup, where the typeface is very small. You have 2 columns on big paper. And so the 23 pages probably took me an hour to go through, or even a little bit more than that. What I will say is that once you've taken a look at the story, or if you want more of a plot synopsis kind of look at the story, go check out the video that I'll link to from Liminal Spaces channel. And hope you enjoy the story. And I've learned that I should be reading more Algernon Blackwood, and maybe you should be too. So with that, I'll call it here. I hope you enjoyed this little quick look at the Willows. As always, if you like what I'm doing, if you want to support the channel, you know what to do. Links in the description, all that good stuff. And have a good weekend. It's Friday as I'm recording this. Hopefully I'll get it out in a timely fashion. But have a good weekend, and I will see you next time for goodness knows what. Have a good one.